freedom, we're not talking about price. That's a side issue. That's not important. So think of free speech, not free beer, to understand the concept of free software. When a program is not free, we call it non-free software, proprietary software, user-subjugating software, because a non-free program sets up a system of digital colonization that keeps the users divided and helpless. Divided because they're forbidden to redistribute copies, and helpless because they don't have the source code, so they can't change it. They can't even investigate independently what it really does to them. And these programs frequently have malicious features. I'll say more about that in a little later on. There are only two possibilities with software. Either the users control the program, or the program controls the users. If the users have sufficient freedom, then they control the program, and they can control the computing that they do with it. And that's the way it should be. Users deserve to control their own computing. But if they don't have enough freedom, then the program controls the users. And the owner or developer controls the program, so through that, it controls the users. So the non-free program is an instrument giving somebody power over the users. This is an unjust power that no one should ever have. More precisely, there are four essential freedoms that define free software. These are the freedoms that users need in order to control effectively their own computing. Freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish. There are proprietary programs that won't even give you that much freedom. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code and change it so as to make the program do your computing as you wish. Freedom 2 is the freedom to help others. That's the freedom to redistribute exact copies to others when you wish. And freedom 3 is the freedom to contribute to your community. That's the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions, supposing you've made some, to others when you wish. Each of these is a freedom that you can exercise when you wish, but it's not a requirement. With a free program, you're free to run it as you wish, but not required to. You can run it the way you don't wish if you're a masochist. You can also decide not to run it at all. You have the freedom with a free program to study and change the source code, but you're not required to change the source code or look at it. You can run it just the way you got it if that's what you prefer. You have the freedom to distribute copies to others, but you're never formally required to do so. Now, sometimes you may feel morally obligated to do so, and other times you might not. But you might do it anyway if you feel like it. If you make a modified version or have one, then you have the freedom to distribute copies of that, but it's not required. You can make a modified version and use it privately yourself. So if the program comes with these four freedoms, then it's free software because the social system of using and distributing it is ethical, one that respects freedom and community. But if one of these freedoms is missing or insufficient, then the program is non-free software because it imposes an unethical social system on its users. So the distinction between free and proprietary software is not a technical distinction. It's a social, ethical, and political distinction, and that's what makes it so important, more important than any mere technical issue. So the use of a free program is development in social terms. because the free program is knowledge whose users are free to study it and understand it, and then maintain it, adapt it, and extend it. But the use of a proprietary program is a social problem. It's not development because it's dependence. So our aim should be to put an end to the use of proprietary software. Writing a free program is a contribution to society. Well, writing it and publishing it is a contribution to society. How much depends on the details. Developing a proprietary program is not a contribution, it's a power grab. It's an attempt to subjugate others, and you shouldn't do it. If the program has some attractive features, those are the bait for the trap, because they're meant to attract people to cede their freedom and become users and be trapped in the unethical social system which the program imposes. So if you have the choice to develop a proprietary program or do nothing at all, it's better to do nothing at all, because that way you don't do harm. And thus, we should try to encourage people to develop more free software and do our best to discourage and prevent people from developing proprietary software. And the ultimate goal of the free software movement is that all programs be free so that all their users are free. If you use a non-free program, you have ceded your freedom and you're subject to the unjust power of somebody. And that's what we're trying to put an end to. Now, the most crucial thing to say beyond that about free software is that schools morally must teach free software and only free software. And there are several reasons for this. One secondary benefit is that they can save money some of the time. And that's a useful benefit, but it's not what's really important. So we should never harp mainly on that. More important is that if a school teaches proprietary software, it's teaching dependence. That's why many proprietary software developers will donate gratis copies of their non-free programs to schools. They want to use those schools as instruments to implant dependence on their products. So they deliver the non-free software to the school, and they hope the school will teach the students to use it, and they'll become dependent, and then they graduate, but they're still dependent. And, of course, after they graduate, they won't receive offers of gratis copies from this developer. And they go to work for companies. Well, those companies won't be offered gratis copies. So the idea is that the school will direct its students down the path of dependence, and they will pull the rest of society along with them. That's what the developer hopes for. But schools should never do that. They shouldn't accept these gratis copies, just as they wouldn't accept gratis needles full of addictive drugs to inject into their students. The same idea, of course. Drug sellers would like to give the gratis copies to schools saying, inject these into your students to make them dependent. The first dose is gratis. Once you're dependent, then you have to pay. Well, the school wouldn't accept that, and the school shouldn't accept proprietary software, because the school has a social mission, which is to educate good citizens of a strong, capable, independent, cooperating, and free society. And in computing, that means teach them to be free software users. Don't teach them to be dependent on somebody that will wield unjust power. There's a deeper reason, which is for the education of the best programmers. Natural-born programmers at the age of 10 or so, 10 to 13, they become fascinated with computing. They want to know how everything works. But when they ask the teacher, how does this program do this, If it's proprietary, the teacher can only say, sorry, it's a secret we can't find out. Thus, education cannot begin. But if it's free, the teacher can explain what he knows and then say, here's the source code, read it and you'll understand everything. And those kids will read it because they're fascinated. And the teacher can say, if you come across a point you can't figure out by yourself, show it to me and we'll figure it out together. That gives our natural born programmer the chance to learn a very important lesson. That code is not clear, so it shouldn't have been written that way. You see, natural born programmers are very clever, and they can see lots of clever ways to write code that will work, but other people will have trouble figuring out why. To become good programmers, they have to learn that that's not good code. How do you learn to write good, clear code? You learn by reading lots of code and writing lots of code. Only free software gives you the opportunity to read lots of code of large programs we really use. And then you have to write lots of code, which means writing code in large programs. But how do you learn to write the code for large programs? You have to start by doing it in the small, meaning small changes in existing large programs. Small programs don't begin to introduce the difficulties of large programs. Those difficulties don't appear in small programs. So you have to start by doing small changes in large programs, and only free software gives you the chance to do that. Any school can offer this opportunity if it's a free software school. But there's an even deeper reason: for the sake of moral education. Education and citizenship. Every school must teach not just facts and skills, but the spirit of goodwill, the habit of helping others. So every class has to have this rule. Students, if you bring software to class, you may not keep it for yourself. You must share copies with the rest of the class, including the source code in case someone else here would like to learn. Because this class is a place where we share our knowledge. However, to set a good example, the school has to practice its own rule, which means bring only free software to class. If you have a connection with a school, such as this university or any other, it's your responsibility to campaign for that school to move to free software. Always bring it up as an ethical issue. Don't let the discussion get sidetracked into practical details. And don't let anyone suggest that some practical convenience advantage can justify teaching people the wrong thing. Because that's what it is to teach them proprietary software. It's better to teach people a little of the right thing than a lot of the wrong thing. So keep looking for allies, be persistent, organize, keep spreading the word, and you can get your schools to move. Now, to make free software a real possibility, to make using a computer without proprietary software a possibility, I developed the GNU operating system. GNU stands for GNU's Not Unix. It's a recursive acronym. And it just happens to be the name of that animal that lives in Africa. And the GNU system is typically used together with a program called Linux. So please don't call this combination, which is basically the GNU system but also contains Linux, please don't call the whole thing Linux, because that means not giving us credit for our work. So please call it GNU/Linux or GNU plus Linux, and give us equal mention. So that's the idea of free software, and sometimes after a talk about that, people would ask me whether these ideas apply to anything else. Like sometimes they would say, what about hardware? Should hardware be free too?